Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's session, How Libraries and Vendors Are Leveraging the Open Ecosystem to Improve Access to eBooks. I'm Susan Thomas. I'm the room facilitator, and I have a few reminders for you before we get started. The first one is that there is a code of conduct for the Charleston Conference that's available on the conference website. And then the second is when you are speaking, if you have a question or a comment, please use the microphones. There's two in this room. And with that, I will turn it over to Rob Cardellano.
Well, thank you all for coming this afternoon. It's so great to see all of you in person. We're here to talk about how libraries and vendors are leveraging the open ecosystem to improve access to ebooks. I'm joined today, I'm Robert Cardellano. I'm from Columbia University Libraries. I'm the Associate Vice President for Technology and Preservation. I'm joined by Robert Boissy from Springer Nature, Nancy Lin from New York University, Audrey Marcus from ProQuest, and James English from LYRASIS and the Palace Project. They'll each introduce themselves when they get up to speak. So let's jump right into it. Leveraging the open ecosystem. Why does this matter? Why do we care? Well, I'll start with a question. Can we imagine a better academic ebook? A friend of mine, Carol Mandel from New York University, said, could we imagine a worse one? But Ann Thornton, my university librarian at Columbia University Libraries, had come, prior to her role at Columbia, from New York Public Library. And public libraries had approached this problem, and they promoted what's called a reader's first approach, with a common method of access to ebooks, easy discoverability, search, download, and read, the ability to get a book, find it, download it, and read it in 3 easy steps, and a great reading experience. So at Columbia, our goal became to transform the academic ebook reading experience. And this is for all of our ebooks. That includes the books that we acquire through license or purchase or subscription from our university presses and our commercial providers, open access ebooks, and the items that we digitize from our unique and distinctive collections. So to accomplish this, to do this, we need to partner together and collaborate with a broad coalition of stakeholders, including libraries, publishers, ebook providers, and nonprofit organizations. In fact, the folks you see here on the stage today, NYU, Springer, ProQuest, and LYRASIS. So we at Columbia are in our second phase of this effort, and we've launched the Palace Project in the fall of 2022 with over 250,000 ebooks, including from many providers like Springer and ProQuest, Johns Hopkins University Press, Casalini Libri, open access books from oapen.org, and highlights of our Columbia digital collections. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to solve this problem of transforming the academic ebook and to imagine a better ebook reading experience? Well, I believe the way to do this is to collaborate on standards and allow the vendors to compete in the marketplace. This is not a new phenomenon. We've seen it in many other sectors of our industry. But the open ecosystem, I believe strongly, will foster the growth of the ebook market, specifically the academic ebook market. It will reduce user confusion by providing a more consistent reading experience, and it will contribute to the long-term sustainability of collections and services. Every dollar we spend on multiple overlapping vendor technology platforms is a dollar not spent on building and sustaining our collections. Now, when we talk about the types of standards, I'll mention a few of them that we're looking at. First is, how do we log in? How do we gain access? And so we're working with authentication standards such as Shibboleth and SAML. With discovery, we're working with standard metadata models and standard identifiers. If we have to use access control or digital rights management, we would like to promote the licensed content protection standard, Readium LCP, which is an open standard. And regarding reading experience, we want to provide a reading experience that's built upon open technologies, and the Palace Project app, the Palace Project mobile app, is an example of that. And then finally, we want to support through that mobile app standard files, standard eBooks, PDF and EPUB namely. And we want to work with the existing standards from the standards bodies and communities that we work with today, including the W3C, the Readium Consortium, the In-Common Federation that supports the eduperson identity, and the OPDS and ODL protocol, which we may talk about a little later. So I'm going to turn it over now to Bob Boissy from Springer Nature.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob. So I am the Director of Account Development for the U.S. and Canada for Springer Nature. That might sound like sales. It's not. It's library support and services, and that's what I do. I am a librarian, so take it easy. This is my one slide, so I go quickly here through what I had to do, and that is take a 9,000-person organization and convince them to do something new. And that's not always easy, but the way to start is to start with your clients and to find out what they're trying to do and what their user experience, desired end product is, what they're really going for, and understanding that and getting motivated by it is what drives the whole thing through. Actually, James and I don't want to admit it, but a multi-year process to try to get things underway. It was important for me to determine what the benefits and trade-offs were so that I could make a sales pitch to my own company. I assume that you've all had to do something like that in your lives. I looked at the main benefits, and that was my main job is the main benefit, and that's increasing usage of the content, optimizing the usage through whatever means possible. I sold the company on that concept that we would increase usage of our books. We would therefore make our authors happy, and everything would be a virtuous circle. Also, it's also always nice to have Rob and Nancy on your side. So building the client relationship is very important to us. They invest in us. We can invest in them. I knew there would be some, blowback from the company. You're going to, offer them more of a one-stop shop on the interface side, relieving maybe their interface exhaustion a little bit, but that's going to be possibly taking away a little bit from their experience with our platform. Okay, acknowledge things like that. But on the other hand, understand that there's all kinds of possibilities in there of increasing usage, and we already have many millions of sessions a day on our platform, so I wasn't too worried. Plus, I anticipated a lot of collateral use, and what I mean by that is you start on one interface and maybe you finish on another one for other reasons, that you need a full screen, couple of screens and a full-size keyboard, and you want to look at our platform for some reason, and we get other usage on our platform. The scope of the project, Robert indicated. For us, it's over 200,000 books. The pitch is we publish 10,000 English language books a year, 13,000 all told with all languages. That makes us the biggest book publisher in the world, not just the biggest scholarly book publisher in the world, but the biggest book publisher in the world. So it's good to get us on your side early in the process so you have a lot of weight behind you as you're rolling forward, the big snowball down the hill. I had to document the nature of the project, talk to my technical staff. I have to be just technical enough to get the idea across to them of what's going on, how it's going to happen, how it's not going to be dangerous, and maybe how we can pull it off, and then they have to actually pull it off. I had to get the attention of higher level staff, and that goes all the way up to the C-suite to do things like this. And then I had to sell it to all the middle level staff. So that's text data mining staff does our APIs. You could call them our API staff. They were going to be the ones doing the new lifting on this. That is the new API that we needed to have. they needed to determine the technical feasibility. How could we do this? You know, what would it take? What would it cost? All that kind of stuff. It was very helpful that New York Public Library and, James English and everybody had come up with an application that already worked. They could already show what it was. I could have them download it to their mobile phone, and they suddenly understood what I was talking about. That works very well when you're trying to get something new from your own side. Something else on the other side's already working. We got the APIs going, metadata API. Believe it or not, we weren't really doing metadata APIs. We were doing full text APIs because that's what people want to use for TDM. So then we had to do metadata APIs and match it to the holdings of our clients and get that capability, add what you need for a bookshelf application, which is cover art, and add that to the mix, and then let the technical folks get into it. We had two very heroic people, Eddie Bates on the API side. Laird Barrett is our network guru, making sure the authentication and all that works. And my job was to be the owner. If you're going to either, take the blame or you're going to take the credit, but somebody has to be the person who's communicating with the other people. So I was willing to do that. And I said, you almost have to have someone who's, literally a Gemini like myself, half and half. You're somewhat technical and somewhat business, and maybe neither great at either one, but somebody's got to own the whole thing. So our next process in this is assessment. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think we'll have some partners in doing it. So I'm looking forward to the assessment part. I think from what I've heard, it's already going pretty well. I'm going to turn that over to Nancy.
Thanks, Bob. I'm Nancy Lynn, the Senior Data Project Strategist at New York University Libraries. NYU believes that promoting open standards and interoperability will allow us to innovate better. We're fortunate enough to be working directly with aggregators, publishers, and software developers to build increased access options for our users. We did not want to build siloed, bespoke solutions. According to NYU's counterstats from last year, we had around 3 million total item requests for ebooks, of which 2 million came from ProQuest eBook Central Books. So as mobile and tablet use increases, we're realizing that we're really still only offering very clunky e-readers such as Adobe Digital Editions and vendor-specific e-readers. So I'd like to take a minute here to show some visuals. Oh, I didn't go into my... Okay, so the Palace, the Palace app is available for iOS and Android download, and our users will log in via SAML and our typical multi-factor authentication, and then just like with any of your mobile apps like New York Times, you then have access to your materials without having to re-log in every single time. So we have these Netflix-like lanes where we are promoting specific subsets. We have over 200,000 titles right now from eBook Central and some from University of Michigan Press. We chose to do eBook Central because obviously it's our sort of central aggregator for many of our presses. And so we do have a dual hosted strategy, which, as you can tell from the numbers that I described earlier, eBook Central still really is a place for our users to go to get a lot of our ebooks. And so we wanted to have this mobile opportunity for them to download a book with one click and read it. And so we did see, and this is our second launch. Our first launch was with Simply E, and we did see that the books that were part of our courses were, even our NYU Reads book, which was in ProQuest at the time, were our top titles. So, it's just it really is one click. You click on the title, you click Get, and you can start reading the book. This is an EPUB title, and in our catalog. We did this for Simply E. Now we're still just about relaunching, but we will have these second links. So if you come to this book in our Primo Discovery interface, you can click, know about the fact that you can read this book in both eBook Central website as well as the Palace app. So Rob likes this image because it shows you currently literally what our users have to go through to read an ebook in a mobile app. And I mean, it is, and I did it the other day, and I still couldn't get the book because they're like, oh, your ID doesn't match, you have it on your desktop. And so I didn't actually even come to a journey that ended with a book. I mean, this, you know, so, and I did the same with, not to call out people, but these ebook apps can, because they're trying to deal with DRM, it can be challenging. And I don't know, you know, what, I do know LYRASIS has worked, you know, very closely with ProQuest and with Columbia's efforts on the authentication piece with JW tokens. I mean, it's not just something that is happening. There's a reason for why this path is much smoother into the 3 clicks in this new product, right? So I know we're supposed to be having a lively conversation, and I'm talking too much, so let me see what else I want to highlight. I just want to say that, okay, let me just, I know there's some technical people in the room, they're like, what are these open standards that we're talking about? So OPDS is one of the standards that we use among many that Rob described, and so it is in JSON, but what's interesting about it is the actual inclusion of acquisitions links for the actual thing itself, right? So if we have KBARD or MARC and you've got the URL, it goes to the pretty page but if you're trying to develop an app and you want to know, how can I get that PDF? How can I get that EPUB? Where is it? Does it require a DRM, a CSM file? Is it open access even? So I just want to remind, I know there's some open access folks in the room that we've been working with. We're interested in both. We want to know, where is that object? What are the rights around it? And so I can keep innovating around it. And if we use, you know, ProQuest method or Springer's method or, you know, OCL, whatever method, it's not going to work unless it's an open standard and we sent ProQuest, here's our open standard, follow it, and, you know, with a few tweaks, of course, because we're early in the phase, LYRASIS was like, okay, we can, you know, 90% of it worked, and then we hacked away until now we have 200,000 books in. So, yeah, so I just want to also mention that our next steps, get back to our slide. So we are going to continue developing, and we want to go into, so we only have unlimited user access licenses right now because Adobe DRM, I mean, it really is the elephant in the room. It's you know, monopoly. You cannot innovate around understanding rights so that we can create products around it. So LCP is you know, something that we're looking at into the future, and so I hope that everyone in this room realizes what Rob says at the beginning, is that we can all innovate if we have these open standards. And it's not like, oh, it's just open source or open access. It's about how to communicate, how do the machines communicate so that we can build products for our users. And we are very interested in also open access materials and delivering materials to our global campuses. We have Shanghai, we have Abu Dhabi, and literally you're like, okay, I can't send this book because it'll take 2 weeks. I can scan it, but I don't want to just send a PDF because that's, you know, who knows what's going to be developing with controlled digital lending. But in a service sense, it is so difficult for us to like share a packaged DRM, and it shouldn't be. And so we're hoping to take this infrastructure and develop around it. You know, we have reshare going. We're working with ProQuest on ILL options, and so I think it's very exciting, and it's very important to NYU to think about equity of access to information. You know, it's one of our main tenets, and print books we can share to any small library, any small scholar, but ebooks we cannot. And now I have, you know, 5 million ebooks, and we need to figure out how to expand this concept of global equity to access to information. So we're hoping this kind of infrastructure helps everyone protect what they need to protect and share what they can share. So Thank you. And I'm going to introduce Audrey, who is from ProQuest.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Nancy. So, hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Audrey Marcus, the general manager of the books business at ProQuest, now a part of Clarivate. And what I want to share with you today is why we engaged in this project and what we've done and what we've learned and where we're heading with it. So for us, it was a very quick yes when the folks approached us about participating. Not only do we support all the values and the goals of the project they've mentioned, but we also have a value around choice and ensuring libraries have the opportunity for choice, particularly when it comes to the patrons and furthering the innovation around the patron engagement. And anything that we can do to improve that engagement and improve that experience for the benefit of the learning outcomes, we're absolutely going to participate. And this has been a great project, a big learning for us, not only internally, but also engaging with the folks on the stage and others that have been mentioned. So for us, this has been about roughly a 12 to 18 month experience. We did carve out dedicated resources within our product and engineering teams and within our roadmap to support this initiative. We also had to build a handful of things. I'll highlight three things that we built. So a few folks mentioned the open standard OPDS, which I think Nancy mentioned. So we did, that was a new build for us. We did build that metadata and now can support it. We also equally had to build a number of things around DRM. It's still here. We still have to support it. So we built an API to receive the distinct user IDs back from the schools because we do need to honor and log that distinct DRM usage. So we built that, and then going back, when we are delivering a DRM protected book, we do need to deliver that with the Adobe key. So we do still need to run this through our Adobe content server, and we pass through the Adobe key to the library to then open up the DRM book protected. If it's DRM free, we are passing through the EPUB or the PDF of whatever the title is. In terms of some of the other things that were mentioned, we absolutely support and would be happy to engage with the LCP, but unfortunately in its current state, it's not up to the standards of the publisher requirements. So it would put us in breach of contract by engaging in that. So we support that, and we'd be happy to engage in enhancement around that. It's just the standards are gonna have to lift around it. And finally, what I'll say is we've gone live now with recently both NYU and Columbia, so we're very eager to watch the engagement and the usage, and we'll be partnering with them to see how that's coming, get the feedback, and continue to improve. And we've built to scale so that this project can scale as well. So whether it's adding in additional universities, additional libraries, additional users, additional content, access models, these are all things that we're aiming to support through the project. And we view this as a journey, not as a we've delivered the content and congratulations. So it's been a really great experience, and thank you to all of us for all of you for including us. We've really enjoyed it. Thanks. And now I'm going to turn it over to James from LYRASIS.
Thank you, Audrey. I know how. There I am. My name is James English. I'm the Director of Business Development. I work at LYRASIS under the Palace Project division. What does a Director of Business Development and a .org, a nonprofit, do? Well, it's really around partner integrations, reaching out to the community around community supported software that we host and provide to our clients, and work with other providers, whether they be other nonprofits or commercial providers of content. And that's really my role. Prior to that, I was a product manager at the New York Public Library working on Simply E, came over to LYRASIS, where I've since taken that same technology, and we're working to make that more available, more integrated into the open ecosystem of ebooks and content. So, there's the, see, I still can't use a computer. All right, so perspectives from the middle. So what's kind of interesting to me in this whole process has been that we had to concurrently work with two commercial providers at the same time, with two clients at the same time, both trying to achieve the same objectives. some different project goals in some aspects, but ultimately trying to achieve the same thing, easier access to eBooks. And so some of the lessons that we learned was how can we do that better? What were some of the best practices, surprises that we found? I'm going to cover some of those, and I got a little bit of things I will read off to you. So as service providers, observations. Technology is ever evolving, and so are user expectations. When I look at my son and the expectations of how he interacts with technology, it's very different than what we do. People laugh if you have Facebook. People don't understand why the laptop doesn't have touchscreen. So the expectations of users are ever evolving with technology, and we have to evolve our services to meet those user expectations, or otherwise they're not going to use our services. As a service provider, we also must rethink our operations and products and services in this constantly evolving technology race, because we cannot stay in the status quo, even if we're a nonprofit, even if we're an open source program. Libraries must be prepared to lead these efforts and be prepared to manage multi-party engagements with an eye to the broader community's needs and service provider needs. And that last part's important. Service providers are, they're providing a service and they have contracts and they have to adhere to those. Maybe around DRM, maybe around publisher rights. It may be around security that is provided by that. And we have to be able to work within those frameworks, within those restrictions, and honor those when we do our projects and our some of these collaborations we do. As libraries, we need to move beyond descriptive metadata standards. I think several folks have mentioned that before, and I'm just going to echo it because it's really at the heart of what we had to do in this project. Formats, and we have to move beyond these metadata standards, the formats that we use, and the protocols that we use, because our systems and services and the providers of those systems and services and the user expectations are no longer served by them. And I'm going to talk specific. MARC, ONYX, KBART, OAI, PMH, SWORD, you name it. It's a metadata format that a lot of our systems support, but we support them because that's what's in the system more often than not, but we only use parts of them to actually do the things we're trying to do, which is provide access to content and discoverability of content. So we have to move beyond them. Those were purpose-built at a specific time for a specific function, and may no longer be relevant for our systems and service providers or our users. Things like BibFrame, OPDS, the linked data hold more promise than simple system APIs. We need common protocols and standards to expand the functionality. They need to accommodate what we call, Rob and I were joking, we need to add CRUD into our metadata. What does CRUD mean? Create, read, update, and delete. We need to bring the transactional access of getting an ebook or digital content into our metadata. Descriptive metadata just isn't enough, because at the end of the day, just knowing that the book or the content exists doesn't really do anything for you, because you actually need what's inside that content to actually make use of it, not just that it exists out there. And so that's what we need to work towards, and we need to lead this as libraries. We also need to accommodate things like not only the descriptive metadatas, but holdings data. ProQuest and both Springer acknowledged that, look, some of the things we had to do were to develop our system so we actually could communicate holdings and not rely on the fact that they're coming to our platform. We need to add license data. What are the terms that the publishers have asked to enforce and provide to our clients and holdings? We need to include that into the metadata. We need to also acknowledge access and DRM. Those need to be part of the transaction, that CRUD that we need to add to our metadata. And then some of the lessons learned, stepping out of what I think some of the things we need around technology. Again, only the library can lead this, and because that is where the client relationship is, and that's the mission that we're both trying to serve, both as nonprofits and as for-profits. Business development is really what follows on after we do that client engagement. We'll figure out as vendors how to work together and operationalize, but let's get the clients where they need to be, and then we'll work out the rest. As a service provider, community standards actually help us out a lot. And as we can make our systems more interoperable, which sounds like an the antithesis of competition, really isn't. It really will facilitate competition in the marketplace when we can interoperate. Think of the World Wide Web if we didn't have standards. What if we still had separate web browsers for separate internet? There would not be the rich market of the internet that we have today. Documentary integration. Just because there's a standard written, how you interpret standards is different between engineers. So we actually need to extend our documentation of use of those standards and how we interpret them and consume them and use them. And then be prepared to walk your collaborators through that documentation. It's not really fair to just throw a document over the wall and expect them to read it and implement it. We have to be able to walk them through it because they will point out where we had omissions, where we made assumptions in our description. As vendors, we need to build R&D and tests beds for collaborations into our service operations. Without them, it makes these collaborations very, very hard. It's also very, very difficult to do R&D and development and collaboration on production level systems because you have a lot of other things that you have to accommodate, such as security and robust network management that may be in a whole different division from the group that you're working with. So we need to think about, as service vendors, how we bring those operations. We didn't have them in ours, even as an open source community developer. We didn't have some of these test beds. Thankfully, Columbia helped point that out and got us down that path, and we urge other vendors and service providers to do the same. It'll make your product stronger, your clients excited to work with you, and we'll give you an edge over your competitor who does not do it, for you commercial folks out there. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Actually, I want to ask some of my colleagues on the panel, what was the hardest thing in working with a nonprofit open source type of
Pass.
pass?
Nobody gets a pass.
No one.
So, I think this would be true for a for-profit or nonprofit. It's challenging anytime you go outside your four walls and start doing development and collaboration, because everyone does have a different style of writing requirements, of thinking through priorities and sequencing, engineering approaches, architectural approaches, even just timing of releases and development and coordinating that, and then the testing and even the debates around how you test, who you test, and what order you test with. So I won't say that it's a nonprofit thing. I'll say it's an added challenge when you leave your four walls, and you just have to be that much more flexible and that much more communicative to ensure everyone is speaking the same language and understands the next steps, the end goals, what were the outcomes, and what we're seeing. So, Bob?
Yeah. Let's see. Can't see the whole room. It's kind of disconcerting. Hi over there. Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, as a commercial publisher, dirty word, right? Commercial publisher, for profit. I am working with people inside my company who are going to question all motives. They want to know what's in it for them. What's in it for them, what's in it for us. So that, you have to be able to explain all of that, and explain it, in terms of, even pluses and minuses to show that you understand both the pluses and the minuses. So when working with a consortium, it's kind of like, well, what are they doing? What are they doing this thing for? That's not what necessarily we're familiar with consortium doing. And I had to explain, well, they're responding to, some academic clients who've seen something really good happen in the public library sphere, and things like that. So the main thing that I experienced, even before we got to anything technical, was just explaining motivations of why the different parties would want to engage in something like this, spend the time, spend the money, et cetera, et cetera. So, that was the hurdle that I jumped over.
I've had the opportunity to work with information technology companies for most of my career. First 20 years I worked in IT. I'm not a librarian, I'm a computer scientist and Jim Neal, my old boss, used to say, Rob, you're an officer of the libraries, but you're not a librarian, which I never really understood, but I think I'm starting to get the idea. But we've worked with IBM and DEC and Sun and Apple and Oracle and Cisco and Microsoft and major companies over decades. And our approach was always to tactically work with solutions that were available to us at the moment in time, but strategically remain open. And that approach of strategically being open has served us in universities, whether it's TCP/IP and the open internet, whether it's early web technologies, whether it's the use of HTML. All of these major shifts in what we how we use technology has always been based on trying to strategically remain open. And in doing so, we grew the market. And no one would argue today that the web, which is completely open technology, is not successful, right? It's what, 40 or 50% of the world economy has information technology built into it in some way or another. You can't use a toaster today without having having it connected to the net, right? Your doorbells are connected to the net. So the transformation has really been very dramatic because it was open technology. So a lot of the conversation that I've had with the commercial companies has been starting with the business side of the house, not the technology side of the house, to reassure and build relationships with the business side of the companies that what we're trying to do is actually grow your business. We're actually trying to help you sell more information to us. But the reason why we're not selling more is because we think there's fragmentation, there's duplication. And by alleviating some of those challenges, we think our users will come and use these technologies, and it will grow the market. So before we talk to the technology folks, I wind up talking to the business side of the house. And building those relationships and building trust takes time, but I believe it's worth spending that time if we're going to solve the overall problem, which is we want to improve academic ebooks at scale across the world.
Do we have any, I want to take a moment and ask if there's anyone in the audience that had particular questions or observations from what we've talked about.
And if you could, just please stand up and use the microphone.
Yeah.
Hi, sorry, just a follow-up to that. I'm Lisa Noctegal from Oxford University Press, and I would venture to think that it's not a question of not-for-profit versus commercial publishing or company, that the integration is a project. So I'm kind of curious, Bob, at what point did you introduce this idea into your organization, and how long did it take you to get it onto the roadmap?
Yeah, I think it's this, Bob, you need. James approached us at a certain conference, and we talked about it for a while, and I had to wrap my head around it. I had to understand what New York Public Library did. It took a couple of years.
Yeah.
The pandemic didn't really help. And it is a little bit of work to get the right people talking to each other at the at the right time. First, a business layer, feasibility layers, and then into technical layers. And you have to go through all the layers and own all of it. And so it's not a simple thing. I imagine the bigger the company, the more complex we have, more resources, all right, more development perhaps, but also more people to go through. So they always say smaller companies can be agile if they want to be. I don't know if that answers your question, but. Is there more?
Yeah, no, I mean, because presumably you had a roadmap and you needed to kind of schedule this in somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to document things as I went along. I kind of kept a journal so that people would know this happened, then this happened, then this happened. This is where we are right now, and this is what I need right now, so that they would. I kept it more or less a chronological file so they could see, and I kept the whole thing the whole time. So sometimes you get people who are important, but they come into the process late. So if they can read the whole thread, that's helpful. So instead of like little pieces and parts, I really should have been a secretary for my career because I do write things down, and that helped.
And one thing I think that, just to speak about my experience with Bob on this is that he's been patient, because sometimes I'm there eager to go because I have a limited window that I have the right people's attention in my organization. But he has to go find that in his. And then I disappear for a while after he's come back and done a lot of work on APIs, and I'm not ready to do that work. I have to schedule on my side. So I would say, the actual doing of the integrations are not very long. It's everything in between and aligning schedules and the stars and motivations and client needs at the time that make the process longer. Yes.
Hi, Joseph Coivisto, University of Maryland and the USMAI Library Consortium. And first off, very fascinating to hear about these developments, because it definitely presents new opportunities that we haven't even considered within our consortium in terms of servicing electronic material. So that's excellent. But I was hoping somebody might be able to speak to accessibility of the content, and well, first off, accessibility within the actual Palace application, and then accessibility of the content and how that is either mediated or made usable upon discovery through the app.
Right. I can take a crack at that, and I also want to hear from our clients, because I know they do a lot of UX testing on us to validate our claims. At the beginning, the Palace app is built on a number of technologies that were designed explicitly for accessibility. So one reason why we can support Adobe DRM, we don't use Adobe as our rendering technology, is for accessibility, and that's why we went with Redium Foundation and their e-reader technology. It actually exposes the underlying text to the onboard screen readers and assistive technologies of mobile devices, and that was a very deliberate decision. It made our work harder. This app is unique for several reasons, one of them being that it is the only app other than Simply E that can use Adobe DRM with a third-party rendering technology. We're not even allowed to use their DRM with the PDF, because that's more of a license restriction. We also support other proprietary DRMs from some of our content vendors that have they rolled their own DRM either for audiobooks. We also support LCP, which is an open DRM technology that we actually have been successful in using. It's primarily ran out of the European Digital Reading Lab. It's backed by publishers over in Europe to fund that organization to maintain that LCP. We actually use it for Amazon audiobooks and Amazon publishing content on our public side. So it has some, they're one of the top, I think they're one of the top 5 publishers now for trade ebooks. And so it is vetted, but it is something that publishers in the US have to get used to. It does have, depending on how well you implement it, does it do the security. What's nice about it is it allows you to be very creative in the type of terms you want to apply for it. It's not baked into the technology as it is with Adobe DRM, like 6 device limits. It's something you configure it to do and apply. So sometimes there's a criticism by publishers like, oh, it doesn't do that 6 device limit. And it's like, yeah, it does. If you tell your license that it needs to do that, it will do that. It's actually stronger encryption too, which others won't admit, and it hadn't been hacked or broke yet, unlike others. So.
When we were in Simply E, which was our first round, obviously the New York Public Library serves the public library, city of many millions, and the software is also used in many, many other cities and state libraries. And so obviously they have a very strict accessibility standard. And I mean, let's not kid ourselves, scanned PDF is a very different than an EPUB with, markers on, so when we talk, I mean, it's already really bad in every one of our eBook environments, in that there's an entire scale of what can be really accessible in a, in a real sense. And so, but the product itself is vetted by many users, like the interface and EPUB, tries to follow the standard. In the first round, we did have our accessibility, Harini, our UX team, worked with NYPL on the efforts on their side to do this. With Palace, we'll extend that. We haven't gone into our second phase of testing, but like the books that we already have on eBook Central, it's the exact same process when we download them. If they are, some EPUB files have very odd marginal text, and it's very difficult for certain kinds of EPUBs to even pass, right? And so it is definitely an area that we will need to look further into and develop around.
What I will say on the content side is that if there's an issue with accessibility of the content, no reader will help. So it doesn't matter what platform it's on. So the onus is on us collectively to look at the ways in which we produce material, the formats we store it in, and how we can support accessibility standards that are both here and as they emerge over time. This is a challenge for us in the library community because we tend to collect things and keep things over time. And so what might be meeting accessibility standards today might not meet accessibility standards tomorrow. Forward migration could be a challenge for us. But I think the key here is that Palace, to the best extent possible, is going to support accessible reading when the content allows for that to occur.
Yeah, I would like to echo that, publishing is where accessibility is first addressed in the whole supply chain of an ebook and its cycle of development. Digital rights and licensing, when you asked about mitigation of accessibility, gets in the way of that. Your rights to take a work and correct its failures in accessibility is not allowed by license because you have then created a digital derivative of it, which is a violation of the license, and we can't do that. DRM doesn't allow you to practically do it because you have to lend it and it's encrypted. It's basically destroyed until you get a key to undestroy it. And so you don't really have a clean way of doing mass at scale correction of content. And as Rob said, no reader is really going to help you. All you can do is make sure your reader will allow assistive technologies to work and make that content accessible when it is accessible.
I'll say this quick. I'm Madge Bolt at Massasoit Community College in Brockton, Massachusetts. I was really excited about a month ago to hear that my local public library adopted Palace through Overdrive. And I was like, what's this? We need this for academics. So now I'm seeing this. So we've only got two, right? ProQuest and Springer. And are there others working with Palace? Because guess what? I don't have ProQuest eBooks, right?
Yeah, we.
I am talking to every single entity that we buy stuff from at Columbia, and from what I hear from our collections people, we buy a lot of stuff from a lot of vendors. And so, so they've been very supportive, and actually this week I've had a chance to talk to many of the ebook providers, and they're very supportive. I think the key here is, you just said something terrific. You have students in your area that might use the public library to access books using the Palace Project app. If you then add support for your library for books using the Palace Project app, the students could not only use one app to access your collection, but they can use the same app to access the public library's collections. And that consistency, extending not just across collections or vendors, but across libraries, is a wonderful selling point. We have that on the web today. The students use Chrome and they go to all the world's content. Why can't we do the same thing for ebooks? And that is, in fact, a huge selling point. I'm actually working with my local Westchester County to get all the public libraries in Westchester County on board. So we're all working in the same way to provide the students with the most consistent, equitable access to content. And if it's easy for them to access it, they're more likely to use it, which of course is a virtuous cycle, as was mentioned earlier. If you would like to, later on, I'd love to hear which providers you would like us to go after. That's the word. I'm happy to add them to the list. and make the calls.
Great. I know. We tell our students, just read it, just read the PDF in Chrome, you know, because everything is just so complicated otherwise.
It's too complicated, yeah.
Right.
Are there any other questions? I have a question for folks in the audience. Has anyone tried other type of projects like this or explored other technologies similar about either bringing mobile or building upon standards with some of the programs that you do, or metadata standards? Just kind of curious. Because we're looking for best practices too. I mean, we learned by doing, and we're trying to learn from others as well. So
I think we're good. We're good.
are we over time? Oh, we're at 2 o'clock, so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone, and just a personal thanks to both Springer and ProQuest, and especially NYU and Columbia for being patient as we went on this journey together. It was difficult at time. As was mentioned, we have different processes, we have different priorities and schedules, but we were all rowing in the same direction. And the fact that they did that with such grace and leadership really made it easy for me. So thank you personally.
And thank you to LYRASIS as well. And if you want to see a live demo of it, both Nancy and I have our iPads up here, and you're welcome to come up. We can show you what it looks like on real devices with real books. Thank you all very much.